Today is really a pleasure to share the stage with Dr. Gary Goldman, founder and the CEO of GHIN. And also we have Ms. Sandy Miller on the other side of the stage. She is the CEO of Runaway Innovation Hub. So Gary and Sandy, it's a really a pleasure to be here together with you. So first, can you please give us a really a brief introduction, who you are and also what you do?
So yes, my name is Gary Goldman. You've been listening to me all day, probably on and off. I'm the CEO for Global Health Impact Network and founder, and I'm also the founder of Global Health Impact Fund. And we are sponsoring and putting on this day's conference in partnership with Innovator MD and their 4-day conference that's coming up. So I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank Sandra for being here and Ella for being here to talk about accelerators. So just a little introduction is our network is a clinician-driven, funded, and founded network focused on innovation and entrepreneurism in healthcare. And we have just started an accelerator in partnership with ZGC, where Ella is the CEO. And we've also recruited the expertise of Sandra Miller from Runway. And today we're going to just talk a little bit about accelerators and our MedLabs accelerator.
Thank you, Gary. Sandy, do you want to go next?
Sure. So Runway, we're located in San Francisco, and we think of ourselves as an innovation company accelerating the success of global innovators and entrepreneurs. By global innovators, I mean corporates. We mostly focus on tech companies from many different industries. My background, I've really worked with technology-based startups for the majority of my career, or corporates. And I co-founded the Stanford Biodesign program, which is now actually in September going to celebrate 20 years. The Stanford Biodesign program teaches a methodology for biomedical technology innovation and invention, and starting from a blank sheet of paper. And so that program has served to be the model for many programs around the world are based on that Stanford Biodesign methodology and the Stanford program itself. So those are sort of the headlines. And in doing that, I also was able to work with some of the most innovative and entrepreneurial cardiologists earlier on in my career. That sort of led me to biodesign and so forth. I have run, designed, led a variety of startup accelerators at different stages with different objectives. And so some of those have certainly been in healthcare. They've been in the basic sciences and in other sectors as well. So we're going to talk in this session about accelerators. So that context is kind of important.
Great. Thank you, Sandy. So if I may also give also an introduction of the Matlabs accelerator.
Yes.
Since Sandy is also expert, also running the innovation center and also accelerator program, we would like to also hear your insight about that.
We really power the growth of startups through acceleration programs, mentorship, and flexible workspace services. We do have a space in San Francisco where we have a lot of great startups. I have deep experience in working with startups, primarily medical device, but other areas of healthcare as well, certainly. In addition to that, I've been on the investor side at the sort of seed and A level with a group that was called the Angels Forum, very successful. And actually, they really had a lot of medical device investments. And have also worked with and seen sort of that medical device invention process many, many times, from sort of the light bulb often going off in the doctor's head, sometimes the engineer's head, to all seeing that process all the way through from, prototyping, first animal studies, first clinical studies, and then all the way through to exits. And so I've really gotten a lot of exposure about how to navigate all stages of that activity. And then we're going to be talking about accelerators in this particular section. And so I have designed and led several different types of accelerator programs over the years, certainly some in healthcare, basic sciences, but also programs focused in other areas. So that's a little bit of background about me.
So basically, this accelerator is our CGC's first healthcare-focused accelerator program, and we're partnering with Gary with GHIN. And this program, the setup is each cohort around 3 months long, and the first cohort is starting late this month. And we're focusing on medtech and also medical device. The stage is from seed to pre-A. And each cohort, we are meeting around 8 to 10 portfolio companies. And at the end of each cohort, we are investing $100,000 to one of the 8 or 10 portfolio companies in the program, thanks to our fund partner, GHIF. So this is like a general setup of the program. And now I want to talk about why Matlabs is different from other programs in the area and what make us standing out. So it has like really two different, important differentiator. One is a strong China focus, and the second one is a strong clinical focus or component. So first, about this Chinese side, is about our Chinese connection. So our parent company, CGC Group, is the largest science park operator in China. And it manages 27 science park that is located in 20 cities. It has around 135 public companies, including the big tech giants such as Baidu, Microsoft, IBM, and also Tencent. And more than 40% of Chinese unicorn have risen from our park. And then, according to a report issued in 2019, altogether the tech companies in our park contributed to more than 35% of Beijing's GDP. So we can definitely provide a lot of great resources for those who want to set their footprint in China. And so this is the Chinese resource side. And in the program, we are providing actually 2 weeks long courses in the program under the theme of Link to China. So we are providing one-on-one meeting and also workshop, helping those who are interested to enter Chinese market and give them some advice, for instance, on patent protection and also commercialization stage, which are the most interesting, the topic interests most of the startup who doesn't really know China so well. And in addition to that, we are also organizing 10 days business trip, taking the portfolio company or who want to also enter Chinese market to China. And usually we choose several cities to tour and connect them with a local investor, policymakers, and also industry leaders. And we have done this before in a couple of times. And all the expenses and the costs can be covered by us. But of course, this year, because of the COVID-19, we're not doing this activity. And one thing I forgot to mention is also the funding opportunities. So in the China side, we have actually our parent company has participated around 146 funds. And in the US side, we also have a pretty comprehensive fund system that covers investment opportunities from seed round to B round. So this is about the China's focus. And the second really big differentiator of our program, and which is really important asset, is our clinical focus. So one example is now we have more than actually 70 mentors for the program, and more than 60% of them are the clinical entrepreneurs. Thanks to GHIN. So I believe, Gary, you also want to also comment more on that part.
Yeah, thanks, Ella. So, from our perspective, having spent the last, 2 years building this global impact network that is clinician driven, between our fund and our network, it's funded, founded, managed by clinicians. This was a natural next step for us in terms of our network, because we have built an ecosystem of communities around innovation in healthcare, supporting it by bringing in the appropriate knowledge leaders, subject matter experts, access to those clinicians to drive this evolving digital health revolution. But from a fund perspective, yes, we also have been we're a small fund, all clinician funded, and investing in companies. And we feel that we have the ability to identify those very early stage health innovation companies because of the clinical input that we get, avoiding those Theranos kind of investments, right? So by starting at very early stages with us and joining our network, they have these organizations, whether they're clinician founded or whether they're not, have the access to our network of clinicians. And then by partnering with ZGC, we do have global at the beginning of our name, and that was our intention from day one, is healthcare, especially post-pandemic, but certainly pre-pandemic as well. One of the things that digital health accomplishes is it allows us to take excellent care and provide it in the most remote places of the world, leveraging technology. So when we have a partner like ZGC, who has a global position global position in general, and now wanting to get into that healthcare sector, the two together create what I think is a market disruptive partnership for these companies, because now we can come in, we can help accelerate the companies, but we can do it also on a global level. It's one thing to take a company and accelerate it and get local or regional or domestic funding, but it's another thing to take that company and give it global exposure through ZGC's innovation hubs, partnering with organizations like Runway and Sandy. And if you put that all together, then all of a sudden we are really making a global footprint as a partnership moving forward. This is our inaugural accelerator. We're building it as we go, but because we have all the resources that we do, we believe that we will, kind of test the waters with the 8 companies that are in this particular cohort, with the idea of then continuing that either on a quarterly or a semi-annual basis, bringing in cohorts and expanding the model. So, Ella, thank you for, certainly the opportunity for this. And, the first person that we reached out to was Sandy, because Sandy actually has a great reputation in terms of being an accelerator consultant. And we're very excited to bring her into this fold as we move forward. And that's why I felt it was great to have the 3 of us on a call to kind of just talk a bit about accelerators in healthcare, now that we have an idea about what we're doing with MedLabs. So Sandy, I'd love to hear some more from you.
What's for a healthcare company, a healthcare startup that has the opportunity to take advantage of all of these resources and relationships in China? Are there particular areas of healthcare where there's greater interest, where these types of companies or companies working on these types of problems in healthcare might have a better opportunity? Or is it hey, we have great resources for manufacturing, or help us understand just a little bit more specifically what the opportunities are and what the interest is for companies who might be in this program, and maybe some of the future cohorts?
Yeah, this is a great question. In Chinese side, actually, I think what we can really help most is around the two type of companies. One is a medical device company, and also the other one is a Matlabs. I keep saying Matlabs, MedTech company that really have a huge need for market and also commercialization need. And this is what China are good at. We have like a big population. The two of our healthcare focused science park, they are very specialized to helping. One is focusing on the medical device, and the other is focusing on the biotech. And they have some special organization and also resources to help the company to understand and also to apply for the CFDA. First, you need to understand how the whole healthcare system is in China, and also in order to get really to start, you need to have the approval from different level. So you need as for instance, like outsider, you do not really expect yourself to start from scratch yourself. You need to find a local partner, sometimes via an agent, or sometimes from some accelerator or incubator from China. So one of our partner, for instance, their founder is the previous members from the CFDA, the retired member from CFDA. So from that side, they can give a lot of very valuable opinion. And also, meanwhile, a lot of times, this is also similar to United States. You need to first, before you submit your file to the committee, you need to first understand whether that meets a certain criteria. And a lot of times, you want the insight from the hospital professionals, from the doctors. And therefore, you need some people to help you to do that. And we do also have such a different organizations can help. So this is like in China side, and also in United States, for instance. This is also I see the value of GHIN. A lot of times, for especially a lot of digital medicine companies, we're also including medical device companies. They are working really hard to make the product work, get a patent, and also they get a really great technology. We call this like a hard technology, and also get a lot of money from this investor who are really fascinated by this fancy tech. And then it just fail. It's not really because it doesn't work. It does work. It can definitely really help all these medical problems. But the issue is the healthcare industry is very, very different from other sectors, and it's more conservative in many, many ways to convince doctors to really adopt their product, which even though it can, let's say, if it can really help, for instance, increase efficiency or also solve a lot of issues. But because of, for instance, really the difficulty to adapt the technology or many other layers of the issues, physicians just say, no, I'm not going to just take it. This become the issue. So one thing about this accelerator program is that before you really go to that step yet, you have the chance talking with doctors that behind them, there are all this like hospital resources, and also they are specialized in many different areas. You get a chance to talk with the physicians, get their first line opinion or feedback. What do you think? And do you think this is going to work? So this is very important.
And I think, I'm just chiming in real quick, Sandy, is, we've had practical experience with that. Here we were, from my standpoint, I was a serial entrepreneur practicing medicine, had zero experience with venture capital, other than the fact that I'd never raised a penny from a VC prior to this with all my companies, but what I'd heard. And then we started the venture capital fund. We have a small cap, $10 million venture capital fund, but it was so educational to experience that, because through the due diligence process of looking at our funnel, I would bring in the targeted clinicians for that, that type of company. I'll give you a perfect example right here in Silicon Valley is an investment we made Plethi, okay, which is an orthopedic surgery physical therapy solution that had developed a device, a sensor, which could monitor range of motion, force of motion, could be used post-operatively from orthopedic surgery. It could be used for any kind of musculoskeletal condition. And a great concept in itself, but there weren't any clinicians on the team. And when we started looking at it, I brought in like 4 or 5 orthopedic surgeons, a bunch of physical therapists, some chiropractors, and I could almost predict as a clinician how the first meeting was going to go because we had already done quite a bit of due diligence. And, you know, when you look at a digital health company that has to integrate into an electronic healthcare record, has to integrate into the workflow of the clinicians who are seeing 30 patients a day using an EHR that they really don't want to be using to begin with, and then adding in a sensor now that's delivering them data which they've never used before. And again, we're not talking about critical care doctors, we're talking about orthopedic surgeons. And it was predictable that they got on the call and the feedback that they gave to the CEO of that company early on was so valuable as part of the due diligence process that we initially were not going to make the investment, and then we ultimately did because of taking the feedback that we gave them. They were able to, you know, basically pivot a bit on their platform. So that's the real value of, and that's when it became grossly apparent to me that from an accelerator standpoint, getting that feedback very early on, as opposed to later when you've spent now $4 million on a product and it's not marketable because the clinicians will say, I'm not going to use this. That's where the real value is. And that's why I think from an accelerator standpoint, getting that feedback very early on is integral to a successful investment.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think the road is paved with many failed startups that really struggled to get that physician adoption feedback. So that's one of the things that you all have put together with MedLabs. And not only do they get it from the GHIN physician clinical mentors, but they also get it from the China medical community and all the the different players in the healthcare system in China as well. And getting that connection is really important. So that's a terrific differentiation. I think that Ellie, you had some questions for me on accelerators that maybe we should shift to in the interest of time. Mm-hmm. So I think you had asked me about what startups should expect from joining an accelerator.
Exactly. Since you're also a really experienced and also expert in the sector, I think it's also very valuable for you to share also from your insight as a startup. What do they really expect to get from joining accelerator, and also whether the standard is, hey, I want to look at some ranking to choose the #1 best accelerator in the area. Is that really to choose the best accelerator, or should they choose the right accelerator? So love to also hear your insight.
The startups that you select that are in your cohort for your accelerator program, the work that you do with them and how you guide them and the support and mentoring that you put around them, ultimately the goal is to increase their ability to get their next funding. Now, so that's a general statement. There are variations of accelerators. There are accelerators at different stages. So one of those variations, for example, could be a later stage startup where they may have paying customers and users, but they've just started to do that, particularly like if it's a B2B business model where maybe they're okay near term on funding, but they need help in getting enterprise customers or corporate customers for their company, and getting new, whether it's a hospital system, for example, or an healthcare insurance provider, to get those sorts of customers. So again, it depends on the flavor and the stage of the particular accelerator. But at the end of the day, it's that increasing the potential and ability for that startup to get their next funding and to continue to sort of, or whatever that next critical milestone might be for the, to continue to build value and reduce risk for that startup.
Right. I think the only thing I'll chime into also, which again, I believe market differentiates what we're creating here, is that most accelerators are, to coin a term, one and done. So they get you to that point, they run you through, and then it's like, you're on your own now. Good luck. You've graduated the accelerator, you've got the diploma, but now you got to go out and get a job, right? So you got to go out and raise the capital, and you have to be able to go out and take that capital and, as you say, use it effectively. What our plan is here with this accelerator is it's just the beginning, okay? The idea is we're creating this ecosystem where now that the accelerator is done, what we're going to do is plug these companies into Global Health Impact Network, give them their own community, give them exposure to the network, promote them in the network, give them access to resources within our network, with Innovator MD, with our partners, in a way where we don't say goodbye at the end. We're just starting to say hello, because if we've done our due diligence and accepted them into the accelerator, we believe they have the chance to have an earlier exit in commercialization, leveraging our network. So I think that's a very important marketing point for us as a group.
Yeah, it really is, and I think a lot of startups don't realize that the majority of accelerator programs, once you're done with that particular program, there's not a lot of support as an alumnus of that accelerator program. And with healthcare companies, as we know, they take a little bit longer. And so you do need that longer term relationship, and to have a way, and like you spoke to, Gary, a community. And I think to be able, a company may not be ready to really have a serious conversation with to explore opportunities in China by the end of the first 90 days. But my guess is that they probably, within maybe 3 to 9 months after the program, they still could have the opportunity to circle back and say, okay, we reached this milestone, we proved this, and we sort of have more, it makes more sense now to engage in this. And I imagine they'll be able to do that.
Beyond the acceleration and leveraging the ecosystem of the network, let's not forget that we're Global Health Impact Network and Fund, right? And we have a finance and investment part of our network. So we will work with those companies moving forward in terms of getting access to not just money, but strategic money, because our members are investors through syndicated investment vehicles. Our members are investors in our venture fund, and our members want to participate as active advisors and consultants moving forward as investors with these companies. So all of a sudden you're plugged into this network, and you're not just getting the resources, but you're also getting the funding strategically from those resources.
Yeah, just add one more thing. That's why we're always very, very cautious regarding how we can really help the company, or whether we can help the company. So actually, always one question during our interview to all these companies, always, what do you really expect to get from our accelerator? And we will also make our decision whether we want to include this company based on how much we can really help them. And each company, of course, they all have very, very different need. A lot of them want to find, for instance, want to make a team. They have a really strong, for instance, for the biotech company. This is very often you see they have a great, scientific team. However, they really have no idea how to really commercialize this tech into a real product. And some of them just really want to also get some connection with, for instance, some manufacturer or some big corporate. And some of them just want to also find hospital resources. And some of them want this funding support. So we always really just also weigh that as a really important part. If we don't really think we're eligible, if we don't think we can help, then we will just tell them, hey, at this stage, we don't think we are really the best one for you. So we do really value this a lot. Yeah. So Sandra, actually, I do have another question for you. So we discussed about, for instance, from startups perspective, how do they really choose the right accelerator, and also what do they really expect from us? So I would like to also hear your insight from a different angle. Let's say, as an accelerator, how do you make yourself very unique? And also differentiate yourself from others, and also to be able to attract really the best startup company. So would like to hear your thought about it.
Sure. So from the startup perspective, and in approaching how to choose the right accelerator, I think that you have to be really clear about your motivations and your ability and willingness to engage in the accelerator program. Because we all know that, running and building a startup, it takes tons of energy and time. So I've actually had an accelerator program where I had to kick somebody out because they literally, there were some basic requirements for participation, and they just felt like they could, dip in and, take what they wanted and then leave. And it's just like, no, that's not what we're doing here. And we didn't, we really cared a lot about, that longer term relationship. And we just felt like they weren't going to be a good representative going forward. So I think it's important to be clear about what you want out of that accelerator experience. And, I think you should expect, one of the most important things is the access to mentors, and if you're looking for connections to investors or potential customers for your business, be very clear about what your expectations are, and I think understand how those things will happen. But I think, again, sort of knowing why you're doing this, because you can also choose not to do it, and do it and build your company without an accelerator. A lot of people do that, but startups need a lot of help throughout their life. So you're probably in better shape if you do find a good accelerator for you. I think that, in some ways, the thing that you were speaking to in terms of from an accelerator perspective, to sort of how to succeed and be competitive in the market. Number one, I think your ability to support your startups and be able to tell the story of how the ways that your accelerator has provided differentiated value. I mean, just like we want startups to do, right, and get testimonials, I think it's important to get testimonials from the entrepreneurs themselves, because that really makes the case better than almost anything. And I do think that being very clear about your differentiation, which MedLabs certainly is, has a very specific areas of differentiation that are being brought together with this partnership. I think that is for any accelerator, your ability to articulate your differentiation and the value that you bring is one of the most critical things. That plus, being able to over time speak to a track record is really helpful. And I think that it's not, a lot of the high quality accelerators that are out there. One of the things that some don't do a very good job of, which with the impact network that address, is that building that community beyond, because a 3-month program is just 90 days, right? And so your company may not, may need resources, beyond that program. right? And so you'd want to still be able to tap into those resources. I think the other thing, another area just to identify, and it's something that Ella and Gary, you both have spoken to. So, you know, and I'm sure you both get this as well. One of the things a lot of startups who go through some of the big name accelerators, they go through those programs. They've given up 6-7% equity. They've gotten funding and so forth, and those are very good quality programs. But a lot of those companies still need help raising funding, despite everything that they're already part of. They already went through. They still need a lot of help, and so the ability to be connected to various, a whole mix of different networks and relationships that are being brought to bear with this partnership with MedLabs, that's very powerful, and that is differentiated. And again, thinking beyond just the program is really important for a startup. And so, I think the good news is that I know the startups will will hold you accountable, and you'll want that, right? Because that way everyone's successful. MedLabs is incentivized for all of these startups to be successful, and I know you'll make that happen. You'll help to make that happen.
Exactly, and I also totally agree with you. So in let's say Bay Area, we do have also a lot of accelerator program out there, and each program or accelerator has their different unique style. So MyLabs, we have a very, very strong and also clear focus. One is this clinical focus, the other is a China focus. And actually, two founders, Gary and I, were also have a very relevant background. So Gary, he is an anesthesiologist turned entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. And myself is a PhD trained scientist turned venture capitalist. So we all have like interest in all this vertical, but also I'm more interested in biotech, but also I look at the deals in medtech and also medical device. And also Gary is fascinated to all this like med tech, digital tech companies, a set of in addition to medical device and also biotech. So this is also make our program very different from others out there.
Right, and I also think, from my standpoint, from a serial entrepreneur, it's really interesting having done it before, and then working with a lot of the clinicians that we work with who are innovators who really have not done this before. You bring up a very valid point. It's not like you just go out there and throw a pitch deck together and raise money. It's just, especially now, it's very, very, very difficult. And from a mentor perspective, what I try to impart, through an accelerator or just as a mentor to a new startup, is that the single most distracting thing that a CEO and a management team has to do that doesn't benefit development of their product is going out and raising money. And for the number of times that you have to go out and pitch to get that dollar is not insignificant, because it is distracting. And a lot of times the entrepreneurs will look at the accelerator a bit in a way like that. Well, I got to raise money, and I got to get my tech platform, and I got to build a management team, and I got to do all those things. And absolutely, but that's why we're here. We're here to help you do that and guide you to try to avoid or make as few mistakes as possible. We all make mistakes, of course. But that's the real value of the accelerator. And if you can add to that, as you point out, making those introductions in a way where, wow, you've gone through this network, which is the good housekeeping seal of approval by clinicians that we think this is a good idea and we would use this, it makes it a lot easier to raise that capital, having that behind you. And that's why I really, truly believe this is a market differentiated model.
Perfect. I think probably time is up.
We have some startups, right?
We do actually, yeah. So it's really fun actually today chatting with Sandy, also Gary, to share also a lot of great insight. And also I hope our audience find this also helpful and also valuable as well.
And I'll throw out there, even with I haven't really discussed this with Sandy much, but as part of the whole network concept, we create communities around this entire ecosystem of innovation. So what we are creating is a community around accelerators, not just our accelerator, but the concept of accelerators. And I'm looking to partner with other accelerators as well. And this group right here are at least the beginnings of a group of knowledge leaders in this area. And I encourage everyone on this call and this meeting at Uli's Innovator MD conference, if you want to learn more about accelerators, the story doesn't stop here. That's the whole idea of the network, is that come to the community, join the network, get involved in the community. You can pose questions to these knowledge leaders there and continue the conversation. So
one question. I know you're wrapping up, but one question just to respond to in the chat. Someone asked, how much equity will MedLab Accelerator take?
Great question. So do you want to take this? Should I take this?
You can take it.
Yeah, so every accelerator has to have something to kind of keep it running. So pretty standard is a 1 to 2% equity stake. Because our accelerator is all over the map, we have very, very early companies, but we also do have some later stage companies. We've kind of capped it with the idea, as being entrepreneurs ourselves, we're not looking to take a huge amount of equity to make you successful, but it is important for the network and for ZGC. So the number is 2% with a cap on it, so that if you are a later stage company wanting to be still involved in an accelerator, we're not looking, if you have a $15 million valuation, to take 2% of your company. Does that answer it, Sandy?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Yeah. So great. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you for joining us. And
thank you. It was fun.